The marketplace of Red Willow lay cracked and shimmering beneath the noon sun, its dust-red earth ground fine under hundreds of boots. A ramshackle platform had been nailed together in the square, nothing more than warped planks laid across barrels, yet it might as well have been a gallows. Upon it stood a young woman with her wrists bound tight by rope, her posture stiff with defiance. Her name was Lydia Bram, and that afternoon the town had decided to make her into a spectacle. The auctioneer, thin, sharp-nosed, his mustache curling like barbed wire, slapped the butt of his gavel against his palm. His voice rang harsh across the open square. "Step right up, gentlemen. A troublesome filly we've got here. Thinks she can dress like a man ride, like a man curse, and carry steel like one too. Red Willow has no room for such mockery of womanhood. She'll be sold to whoever's got the nerve to tame her." A wave of laughter rolled through the crowd. Men jostled each other, their faces flushed from whiskey and heat. Some spat in the dust, others hollered crude remarks. Lydia's auburn hair had fallen loose when they snatched off her hat. Now the wind tugged strands across her cheek, but she kept her chin lifted, her green eyes steady. She would not bow her head for them. $20 barked a saloon owner with greasy hands and the reputation of treating barmaids like livestock. 25 shouted a miner whose face was black with coal dust sweat streaking his temples. 30 came from somewhere deeper in the mob. The price rose like the tide, and with it the stench of humiliation. Lydia clenched her fists against the rope, every fiber in her body wanting to spit in their faces. She had fled Boston to escape one man's leash. Now a whole town was trying to slip another around her neck. At the edge of the square, a tall figure pushed forward. His boots struck the ground with calm weight, parting men who muttered but did not resist his passage. He wore a coat dulled by the road, a wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow until he paused, removed it, and let the sunlight strike his gray eyes. Cole Ashford, rancher trail boss, and a name that carried a dozen stories through the saloons of Arizona territory. Stories of storms, weathered cattle, driven through hell itself. Men who crossed him and never crossed another. "Enough," Cole said, his voice low, yet carrying above the jeers. $100. The square hushed. The number crashed over the crowd like cold water. Men turned blinking at him, then at Lydia. 100 for a woman branded trouble madness. Even the auctioneer faltered, gavel hovering in midair. From the wooden steps of the sheriff's office came a dry chuckle. A heavier man emerged, his coat clean, his boots polished. Vickers, owner of most every gambling table and mortgage in 3 counties. He leaned against the post, lips curling. "Ashford, you've lost your senses. Law here says a woman steps out of line, she learns her place. No amount of coin changes that." Cole didn't glance at him. He moved closer to the platform, dust puffing under his boots. 200, he said evenly, and that's final. She leaves with me, and she wears whatever she damn well chooses. The last words cracked across the square like a gunshot. Gasps rose. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. No one else bid. No one dared. "Sold," the auctioneer croaked, slamming his gavel down. Cole mounted the steps, handed over the money, and took the paper that declared Lydia his responsibility. The sheriff, grimacing, drew a knife and cut the ropes. The frayed cord fell away, revealing angry welts across her wrists. Lydia rubbed them, her mouth dry but her spirit unbroken. "I'm not your slave," she said, her voice hoarse but fierce. "I never asked you to be," Cole answered. "You've got belongings at the livery." She blinked, suspicious. "My mara bag and a rifle they took. Then we'll collect them and ride." He offered his arm not as a shackle but as courtesy. She ignored it, stepping down on her own. The crowd parted, whispering, some with awe, others with malice. Red Willow was a town that thrived on spectacle. Today, Cole Ashford had turned the spectacle into a reckoning. The livery reeked of hay and horse sweat. Lydia's chestnut mare whickered and stamped when she saw her, as though recognizing salvation. But when Lydia checked her gear, her hands froze. "My Winchester's gone." The stableman smirked. Sheriff passed it to Vickers. "Women shouldn't be armed." Cole dropped silver coins onto the counter. His eyes stayed hard, unreadable. "Appreciate your honesty. Now saddle her horse." They rode out of town as the sun lowered the square, shrinking behind them into a smear of dust and mutters. Lydia kept her distance, suspicion coiled tight in her chest. Yet each mile away from Red Willow, each clop of hooves, carrying her farther from the jeering mob, loosened a thread of the knot inside her. When the silence stretched too long, she asked sharply, Why did you pay $200 for a stranger? Cole's gaze stayed on the horizon. 5 years back, my sister wore trousers to work the ranch. Some men decided to teach her about proper behavior. She didn't survive their lesson. His jaw hardened. I won't watch it happen again. The confession hit her like a fist to the gut. For a moment, words abandoned her. She looked away, blinking fast. The desert stretched wide around them, merciless yet strangely freeing. Cole guided his black stallion off the road toward a stand of cottonwoods near a creek. We'll camp here, he said. Water's clean, ground soft. You can leave come morning if you choose. Lydia dismounted slowly, her rifle arm itching for the weapon she no longer had. She studied him across the fading light. His movements were steady, unhurried, a man at peace with hard ground and cold nights. Not once had he tried to command her beyond what safety required. And for the first time since Boston, Lydia felt the faintest spark of something she thought long dead, the possibility of trust. The cottonwoods whispered through the night, their leaves stirring in the faint desert wind. Lydia sat close to the fire Cole had built, the flicker of flames warming her hands. She kept her mare tethered nearby within reach, and her eyes shifted often to the black stallion that belonged to him. The animal was strong, glossy-coated, trained to move at the lightest touch. It said much about a man how he cared for his horse. She had to admit against her better judgment that Cole Ashford treated his beast with respect, not dominance. Still, her thoughts spun restless. She had fled Boston to claim her freedom, and yet here she was, tethered again, bound not by rope, but by debt. $200, that was a fortune. She hadn't asked him to pay it. She hadn't asked to be rescued at all. Now, sitting in the firelight, she wondered what price he truly expected from her. Cole broke the silence with a simple gesture. He handed her a tin plate, beans and bacon, steaming in the cool night air. Eat, he said quietly. Trail's easier on a full stomach. Lydia narrowed her eyes, taking the plate with suspicion. I told you before, I'm not anyone's property. His gaze met hers steadily, without heat. You've made that plain. You're free to leave whenever you choose. My only advice is not tonight. Coyotes out there colder than you think, and you're unarmed. I've managed alone before, she muttered, poking at the food with a fork. And you'll manage again, Cole allowed. But Red Willow isn't done with you. Vickers has a long reach. He'll send men to collect what he thinks belongs to him. Her head snapped up. I don't belong to anyone. Tell him that, Cole said dryly. See how much he cares. You were right not to trust me, Miss Bram. But you'll have to trust someone if you plan to make it through this territory alive. His words stung because they rang true. Lydia thought of her father, a professor back in Boston, who had taught her to read Greek and shoot a rifle with equal seriousness. He had died too soon, leaving her at the mercy of her cousin Richard Greedy, grasping Richard, who offered protection only if she agreed to be his wife. The memory made her throat tighten. She had chosen the wilderness rather than his chains, but freedom on the frontier carried a price she hadn't foreseen. She set down the plate, staring into the flames. You think I can't fight my own battles? I think you shouldn't have to fight them alone, Cole corrected. His tone was even, but there was steel beneath it. My sister fought alone. That's how she lost. The words pulled a silence heavy enough to press against her ribs. Lydia glanced at him, at the shadows flickering across his face. He hadn't offered pity, hadn't begged for gratitude. Just a truth born of pain. She exhaled slowly. Tomorrow I'll ride on. My uncle's waiting in San Francisco. He'll see me safe. Cole's expression didn't change. Then tomorrow I'll see you as far as the next town. Safer that way. You're stubborn, she said. Ask anyone, it's kept me alive. The fire burned low. Lydia curled into her blanket, the rifle she no longer had replaced by the sharp edge of vigilance. Yet as sleep crept upon her, she caught sight of Cole across the embers. He had laid his bedroll facing away, giving her privacy, his pistol within easy reach, but his hands loose against the ground. It was a small thing, but for Lydia, who had known nothing but suspicion from men since her father's death, it was enough to uncoil the knot in her chest. She slept deeper than she had in weeks. Dawn found Cole already on his feet, stirring the fire coffee scent drifting on the breeze. Lydia braided her hair, quickly washed in the creek, and tried to pretend she hadn't slept with more peace than she expected. He handed her a cup without comment. She accepted it, their fingers brushing briefly. They broke camp and rode north. The desert stretched wide, its silence broken only by hoofbeats. Hours passed, the sun climbing high heat, wavering above the rocks. It was near noon when Cole slowed his stallion, lifting a hand. Lydia followed his gaze. Ahead on a ridge that overlooked the trail, three riders sat their horses' silhouettes cut sharp against the sky. Her stomach nodded. She knew the look of hired muscle, broad shoulders, loose hands resting too near their holsters, bandanas pulled up against the dust. Vickers's men. Cole's jaw tightened. He guided his horse closer to hers, lowering his voice. Stay calm. Keep your hand near the saddlebag. There's a derringer inside. Not much, but better than nothing. Her pulse spiked. You carry a spare gun in your saddlebag. Always, he said. Never know when trouble finds you. The riders began to descend the slope, their horses kicking loose stones down the incline. Lydia swallowed, fighting the urge to bolt. Running now would make them prey. The leader called out when they drew close, his voice rough. Morning, Ashford. Sheriff said you picked yourself up a prize yesterday. Vickers says she ain't yours. Cole's voice was calm. Funny. Auctioneer's paper says otherwise. Paper don't mean much when the man who runs this town says different. The rider spat in the dust. His companion smirked. Lydia's fingers brushed the derringer, her knuckles white. Every instinct screamed at her to fire first. But Cole remained relaxed in the saddle, his posture loose, his drawl almost lazy. Tell Vickers if he wants to argue he knows where to find me. But he best come himself. Sending pups with guns only gets pups hurt. For a moment silence stretched. The leader's eyes narrowed, his hand twitching toward his revolver. Lydia's heart pounded. Then Cole shifted his weight just enough that his coat fell back, revealing the polished grip of the Colt at his hip. The message was clear. He could draw faster than any of them, and he would. The leader cursed under his breath, then jerked his reins. Come on, ain't worth it today. The three riders wheeled their horses and thundered off in a cloud of dust. Lydia exhaled hard, realizing she had been holding her breath. Her fingers trembled around the derringer. Cole glanced at her, the corner of his mouth quirking in something almost like a smile. Not bad, he said. You didn't shoot too soon. Her glare was sharp. I was about 2 seconds from it. Would have been enough, he replied. But better they ride off with their pride bruised than their bodies bleeding. Less trouble chasing us later. As they pressed onward, Lydia's suspicion of him shifted by a fraction. He hadn't tried to prove himself with violence, hadn't risked her life to satisfy his pride. He had stood between her and danger, with nothing but calm defiance. And for the first time, she wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, she had found an ally in this untamed land. They reached Mesquite Ford by late afternoon, a creek town hammered together from pine boards and stubbornness, its main street rutted deep by freight wagons. Heat wavered above the roofs and the air smelled of tar and horses. Cole reined in before the telegraph office, a narrow building with a bell that chimed every time the wire tapped out a message. Inside, a woman with gray-streaked hair and quick hands worked the key with the focus of a surgeon. Cole tipped his hat. Afternoon, ma'am. Need to send to San Francisco. Urgent family matter. The operator glanced from him to Lydia, taking in the dust, the weariness, the wariness. She nodded once and slid a form across the counter. Lydia gripped the pencil, writing carefully. Uncle Horace Bram stopped safe, but pursued by man named Vickers. Stop claim of guardianship forge. Stop request, written confirmation of my competency and your acknowledgement of my travel west. Stop reply, collect Mesquite Ford. Stop. She signed it Lydia Bram with a calmness she did not feel. Give me an hour, the operator said. Lines have been temperamental, but I'll push it through. They stepped back onto the boardwalk. Across the street, a pair of riders loitered outside the saloon, hats low, eyes sliding over Lydia like a measuring tape. Cole's gaze flicked their way and moved on. Sheriff first, he said. Better he hears our version than Vickers's. Sheriff Grady's office sat next to the general store door, a jar of breeze stirring the wanted posters tacked along the wall. Grady was a square-built man with a nose that had been broken and never set straight. He stood as they entered, his attention traveling from Cole to Lydia without judgment or welcome. What brings you in, Ashford? Trouble from Red Willow, Cole said. Auction on a woman who never should have been up there. I paid her out. Vickers isn't pleased. Grady eyed Lydia's worn trousers, the red marks on her wrist, the grit in her hair. Name, Lydia Bram. He motioned to the chairs. Sit, talk. She told him most of it, leaving Boston skinny with truth and thick with careful omissions. Cousin who thought protection came with a ring and a locked door. The choice to ride west, Red Willow and the platform. Vickers's men on the ridge that morning. Through it all, Grady listened, fingers tapping slow against the desk. You got papers to prove your identity, he asked. No, only my word and his, Lydia said, tilting her chin toward Cole. Grady rubbed at his jaw. Words thin ice to stand on when a man like Vickers stomps. But I've had dealings with Ashford. He doesn't lie easy. Boots clomped on the boardwalk outside. A shadow fell across the doorway, followed by two more. The man who stepped in wore a city-cut coat and the slick smile of those who profited without sweat. "Sheriff," he said, "good to find you alert to your duties. I'm Mr. Caro, attorney for Mr. Vickers. I believe you're harboring a ward of the state." He produced a sheaf of papers with embossed seals and generous loops of ink. "Here we are. Petition of guardianship signed by one Dr. Ezra Caldwell, attesting to the lady's instability, countersigned by a justice of the peace in Boston, and ratified by the seal of the Commonwealth. You'll see it's all in order. We'll be taking custody now." Grady didn't touch the papers. "Slow down. Mesquite Ford isn't Red Willow. We don't haul folks off because a man with money says jump. I'll read what you brought." Caro's smile never wavered, but his eyes sharpened. He set the documents on the desk. Lydia leaned forward despite herself. The wax seal was good, the vellum thick. But the crest was wrong by a hair. The arm on the shield lacked a star she remembered from her father's law books. And the date of Sunday had been marked as a court day. "That seal is outdated," she said quietly. "The Commonwealth revised its crest 2 years ago. And courts in Boston don't sit on the Lord's Day." Caro chuckled indulgent as a man humoring a child. "She's clever, Sheriff. Clever and confused. Delusion often walks arm in arm with confidence." Grady shot him a glance that emptied the snideness out of the air. He read longer, jaw tightening. "These are impressive to a shopkeeper, less so to the law. Mesquite Ford isn't handing anyone to anybody on the strength of ink 1,000 miles away. I'll wire Prescott and I'll wire Boston. Until I hear back, Miss Bram stays under her own power." Caro's smile thinned. "You'll take responsibility when she harms herself or another." "She walked in here under her own boots," Grady said. "That tells me enough for today. You and Vickers can take your concerns up with the wire." Caro smoothed his coat eyes, sliding to Cole. "You're making enemies you can't afford, Ashford." "I pay cash," Cole said, tone flat. "And I don't gamble with lives." Caro left with a whisper of wool and the sting of cologne, his two escorts trailing like flies. Grady exhaled. "I'll need you nearby," he told Lydia. "Don't leave the county till I know what's true. Ashford, post a bond and keep her out of sight if you're smart. Vickers buys men who don't read well." Outside, the street had changed flavor. Word traveled faster than the telegraph when tongues were oiled by gossip. A woman in a blue calico dress ushered her children across to avoid passing too close. The riders by the saloon had multiplied to 4. Cole glanced toward the livery. "Get your mare," he said. "We're not sleeping in town." They crossed to the livery stable. The hostler pretended not to see them. Lydia's mare nickered from a rear stall, stamping in impatience. Cole slipped him coin to keep his eyes on the front door. "We'll tack fast," he said. They had the saddle half cinched when the back alley door scraped open. A man's silhouette blocked the light, then another slid beside him. Lydia caught the flash of brass at a belt. "Afternoon," the first said. "We come to collect what's Mr. Vickers's." Cole turned without hurry. "You're late. He already lost the bid." The man laughed. "Paper says different." Lydia didn't wait for the second line. She darted to the side gate, a rough plank held by a wooden latch, and jammed the Derringer's barrel beneath the latch. One shot splintered the wood, the crack a clap in the enclosed space. The gate sagged. She shouldered it open, grabbed the mare's lead, and yanked. The horse surged, knocking a saddle rack into a row of tools clanging iron against iron. The men swore and reached for their guns. Cole's colt was already up, muzzle steady. "Don't," he said. The word carried more conviction than any sermon. They edged through the broken gate into a narrow side lane, angled downhill toward the creek. A freight wagon sat unhitched on the slope, chocked with a block of cedar. Lydia snatched the block and flung it aside. The wagon groaned, rolled, and gained speed, half a ton of wood and iron careening into the mouth of the alley as the two men lunged after them. The wagon slammed across the opening with a crash that rattled teeth. Shouts rose. Somewhere behind, glass shattered. "Move," Cole said, and they moved. They cut behind the tannery, the smell of hides pungent, crossed a drainage ditch in a single leap, and burst onto the creek bank. Cole whistled. His stallion, tied in front of the telegraph office, had slipped his reins at the call before any hand could grab him, and now pounded toward them, a black streak of muscle and will. Cole caught the trailing rein at a run, swung into the saddle, then pulled Lydia up behind him, while she kept hold of her mare's lead rope. Together they crashed through the shallow water and into scrub on the far side branches, snatching at clothes, sunlight strobing through cottonwood leaves. They didn't slow until Mesquite Ford was a distant blur in the heat, until the only sound was the ticking of cicadas and the low rush of the creek. Cole drew up beneath a pinyon and listened, head cocked. Nothing chased but the echo of their own breath. Lydia slid down, knees weak, half sick with adrenaline, half drunk on the relief of still being upright. She pressed a hand to her ribs, laughed once short, almost angry, then caught herself. Cole watched her without a smile, but not without warmth. "You don't scare easy," he said. "I'm tired of being scared," she answered. They made a dry camp, no fire, just a canteen passed between them and a strip of jerky torn with quiet teeth. Dusk folded into the trees, soft as wool. Lydia leaned back against her saddle, staring up at the thin slice of moon between branches. Her voice came low. "He threatened to have me committed, my cousin," she said. "Said all it took was one doctor who didn't ask questions and a sheriff who owed him a favor. After my father died, the house went first, then the books, then the piano. He tried to make me next." Cole didn't tell her to hush the past. He let it walk out and sit in the grass with them. "I've seen men like Vickers," he said after a time. "They count on folks to be too tired to resist. They win when you doubt yourself." She turned her face toward him in the dark. "And when I don't, then they come in daylight with papers, or at night with guns." He shifted and she heard leather creak. "Grady will wire Prescott in Boston. Your uncle will answer if he's worth the word uncle. But Vickers won't wait on wire. He'll buy himself a faster message man with horses." "Will you keep running?" she asked. "Not forever," Cole said. "You can't spend your life turning circles around a bully and call that freedom." She thought about circles, about how Boston had been a loop of parlors and expectations and doors locked from the outside. About how Red Willow had tried to make a loop of rope around her wrists and call it law. She touched the welt at her skin and felt the heat under it, like a coal that would not go cold. "Then we choose ground and stand," she said. He nodded, and though she could not see it, she felt the agreement ripple through the dark. Somewhere to the south, the creek chattered against stones like quiet applause. Somewhere farther still, in the lit windows of Mesquite Ford, Kara was writing on fresh paper, and Vickers was counting out coins. Men were being hired who didn't read well and shot better. The desert listened to all of it, took none of it to heart. Lydia lay awake a long time, not because fear held her, but because determination did. When sleep finally came, it was without the weight that had ridden her for months. She dreamed of a door swinging open and no one standing on the other side ordering her to step back in. Morning rose pale and sharp, the sky washed clean after a night of desert wind. Lydia stirred from her blanket to find Cole already saddling the black stallion. His movements were methodical, practiced each tug of a strap, an adjustment of the cinch done without wasted effort. She pushed herself upright, brushing grit from her trousers, and noticed he had placed a small packet of dried meat and biscuits beside her. "We ride light today," he said. "Mesquite Ford won't stay quiet after last night." Vickers lost face. "Men like him don't forgive that." Lydia tied back her hair and cinched her mare's girth. "Where then?" "North Ridge. There's a canyon not far from my land, narrow enough that a handful can hold off a crowd. If Vickers means to chase, I'd rather choose the ground." She swallowed her reply. He spoke as if the battle were inevitable. Perhaps it was. Already her instincts hummed with the certainty that Vickers would not rest until she was either broken or gone. They set out, hooves drumming against the hardened earth. By mid-morning, the land began to change, scrub thinning to pale grasses that bent under the wind. Mountains loomed, distant purple ridges, sharp against the sky. Lydia's heart tightened at the sight. Something in her blood stirred at the thought of space wide enough to lose every chain. But the trail behind them was never empty. Twice Cole stopped gazing back across the flats. Once she thought she glimpsed dust lifting faintly from riders, far enough they could not be counted, but close enough to keep the air tense. "They're shadowing us," she said. "Not close enough to strike. They're waiting for an opening." By noon they reached a canyon cut deep into the earth, its walls sheer red rock glinting in the sun. Cole dismounted, scanning the high rim, then nodded. "We'll rest here. Let the horses drink. If Vickers sends them, this place will even the odds." Lydia led her mare to the narrow stream that wound between stones. She crouched, scooping water into her palms, and studied her reflection. The face staring back was thinner than the girl who left Boston, sharper around the eyes, harder at the jaw. She was not that sheltered cousin anymore. She was someone else entirely, someone who would not be bought or silenced. When she rose, Cole was watching her. Not with pity, with recognition. "You ever shot from high ground?" he asked. Her lips curved faintly, once or twice. He handed her the rifle he'd retrieved from the sheriff, polished and reloaded. "Then find your perch. I'll cover the pass." Time stretched. Hours ticked in silence, broken only by the shifting of horses and the creak of leather. Lydia lay prone on a ledge above the canyon, mouth eyes narrowing against the sun. Every nerve in her body strung tight. She thought of her father's voice teaching her to breathe with the trigger, to let the shot surprise her. She thought of Richard's hand on her shoulder when no one was watching, and the sick chill it left in her bones. She thought of Vickers's smile, the way men like him laughed at the word no. Late in the afternoon, the dust appeared again this time. Closer, deliberate, a line of riders sweeping across the flats. Lydia counted 7. At their head rode a man in a white hat posture, arrogant, the tilt of his shoulders, screaming command. Vickers hadn't come himself, but he had sent men to finish what the auction block had not. Cole stood in the canyon floor, rifle slung casual, as if greeting travelers. Lydia steadied her breath. The riders drew up at the entrance. The man in the white hat sneered. "Ashford, you've got something belongs to my employer. Hand her over and we'll let you keep breathing." Cole's voice was even almost mild. "Funny. Paper I signed says otherwise, and Miss Bram isn't property to hand over." The man spat. "You think your word carries weight against Vickers?" Cole shrugged. "My bullets carry fine enough." Silence rippled. Then the leader jerked his chin. 2 riders nudged forward, hands hovering near holsters. Lydia's pulse thundered. She sighted down the rifle, breath held. Cole spoke again, louder. "Last warning, right away." The leader laughed. "You don't scare me." His hand dropped. The canyon exploded with sound. Lydia's shot cracked first, splintering the ground at a rider's horse, sending the beast rearing. Cole's rifle barked a half-second later, precise and merciless, knocking a pistol clean from another man's hand. Echoes slammed off the rock walls, filling the air with thunder. The men wheeled in confusion, horses screaming, dust billowing. Lydia chambered again, every movement automatic, her pulse steady, now that the fight was real. She fired high, clipping a hat from one rider enough to rattle but not kill. Cole's shots walked a line in the dirt before the leader's horse, forcing him back. Within minutes, the canyon mouth was empty, but for drifting dust. The riders fled, spurring hard, leaving only curses behind them. Silence fell heavy. Lydia's hands shook as she lowered the rifle. Cole approached, scanning the horizon. "Good shooting." She swallowed hard. "They'll be back." "Yes," he said simply. "But now they know you're not an easy prize." She stared at him, at the calm strength in his eyes. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe him, not just that he would fight beside her, but that he believed she was worth fighting for. The sun slid lower, staining the canyon walls blood red. Lydia felt the truth settle inside her like an anchor. Freedom was not the absence of chains. It was standing her ground, rifle in hand, refusing to bow again. Night came heavy and restless. They did not light a fire. The canyon walls still echoed with the afternoon's gunfire, as though the stone itself remembered. Lydia sat with her back against a boulder, rifle across her knees, watching the stars flare sharp above the narrow strip of sky. Cole slept in fragments, every shift of wind pulling his hand toward his holster. Neither truly rested. At dawn, Cole saddled the horses. "We can't stay here. Canyon's good for a fight, but bad for supplies. Vickers won't quit. He'll use another weapon law or what passes for it out here." Lydia wiped dust from her face. "The sheriff in Mesquite Ford seemed decent." "Do you trust him?" "I trust him to do his job. But jobs bend when men like Vickers show papers with seals." By mid-morning, they rode back toward town, the weight of decision pressing harder with every mile. Lydia kept her mare steady, her jaw set. She had promised herself never to return to chains of ink and signatures. Yet if she didn't stand now, Vickers would paint her a fugitive forever. When Mesquite Ford came into sight, the difference was clear. The town felt charged, whispers curling in doorways, faces peering from curtains. A broadside notice had been tacked outside the general store, its bold black letters announcing warrant issued for Lydia Bram, also known as Lydia Carlton. Charges: theft, instability, fugitive status. Reward for information. The sight hollowed her chest. Her cousin's name burned on the page like a brand. Cole tore the sheet down and crushed it in his fist. Forgery, thin as smoke. "Thin smoke can still blind," Lydia said quietly. They tied the horses outside the sheriff's office. Sheriff Grady looked up as they entered, his expression grim. On his desk lay a stack of telegrams and the same broadside she had just seen. Thornton rode in last night, Grady said. Brought these papers, swore he represented your cousin Richard. Claims he has power of attorney to retrieve you for your family's protection. He's lying, Lydia said sharply. Richard Carlton is no guardian. He threatened to have me locked away if I wouldn't marry him. These papers, I believe you, Grady cut in, though his eyes were tired. But townsfolk see seals and signatures. Thornton's been talking hard at the church folk, telling them Ashford's hiding a dangerous woman. He's turned half the council against you already. Cole leaned forward, hands braced on the desk. You going to honor those papers? Not yet. I've sent my own wires east and west. Till I get answers, Miss Bram stays free. But you'd best stay close to the ranch. Thornton's stirring a storm. As if summoned, the door swung open. Thornton strode in, coat-pressed mustache, waxed the smirk of a man convinced the world bent for him. Two men flanked him, hard-eyed, their hands never straying far from their guns. Sheriff Thornton said smoothly, I see you've met my ward. Miss Carlton, your family is most concerned. They've entrusted me with your safe return. The papers are clear. Let's avoid unpleasantness. Lydia's spine stiffened. My name is Lydia Bram, and I will not return to Boston in your chains. Thornton's smile widened. Such delusions. Dangerous delusions. I understand, Sheriff. It's never easy when the unstable resist treatment, but her cousin has funds and he is most persuasive. I suggest you act before this becomes ugly. Cole stepped between them, voice low but cutting. You've already made it ugly, Thornton. You tried buying her and Red Willow tried sending guns at us in the canyon. Now you're waving paper. None of it makes you right. Thornton's eyes glittered. You'll regret crossing me, Ashford. Men who do rarely prosper. Grady slammed his hand on the desk. That's enough. Thornton, take your threats outside. Until I hear back from Boston, Miss Bram remains under my protection. And Ashford's too, if he'll have it. Thornton adjusted his coat, fury flashing beneath the varnished smile. So be it. But when the law confirms what I already know, I'll return. And neither of you will stop me. He tipped his hat mockingly to Lydia. Enjoy your borrowed freedom, my dear. He left with his men, the door banging shut behind them. The silence that followed felt heavier than a gunfight. Lydia's hands trembled around the rifle she carried, not from fear, but from rage. He'll never stop, she whispered. Cole's voice was steady. Then neither will we. They left town quickly, wary of the stairs trailing them. Back on the open trail, Lydia let the wind slap color into her cheeks. She thought of the broadside, her name branded as thief and madwoman, and something inside hardened. I won't run anymore, she said aloud. If he wants a war, he'll have one. But on my ground, not his. Cole glanced at her, the faintest hint of respect in his eyes. That's the spirit. We'll hold the Triple M together. Let Thornton come. By the time they reached the ranch, dusk lay thick across the valley. Cole called a meeting in the bunkhouse. Every man came: Hank the foreman, Old Bill, with his crooked grin, young Joey, eager and wide-eyed, even Wong with his apron dusted in flour. Cole laid it plain. Thornton's spreading lies. Papers say Miss Bram is wanted. Sheriff hasn't acted, but that could change. If any man wants clear wages and no trouble, take them now. No shame. Not one moved. Hank spat into the dirt. Boss, we stand with you. Miss Bram, too. Anyone tries to drag her off, they go through us. A murmur of agreement rolled through the room. Lydia's throat tightened. These men who had once looked at her with suspicion now stood as her shield. She nodded once, unable to speak. That night, as she sat on the porch of her cabin, the stars bright above the dark valley, Cole joined her with 2 mugs of coffee. He passed one to her, then leaned on the railing. He'll come again, Cole said quietly. I know. You scared? She sipped, considering. Fear had chased her from Boston, hounded her across deserts and towns. But now, with the rifle at her side and men willing to stand with her, fear felt different. It no longer ruled her. No, she said at last, not anymore. Cole's gray eyes lingered on her face, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that whatever storm Thornton brought, they would face it together. The ranch did not sleep easy after that. Every man knew Thornton's type. If papers failed, bullets would follow. Cole doubled the night patrols, posted 2 riders on the ridge above the valley, and kept lanterns burning low around the corrals so shadows would not hide intruders. Lydia found herself caught in the rhythm of defense-checking rifles, stacking ammunition, keeping meticulous lists of supplies, as if each entry might guard against chaos. 3 days passed without incident. But on the fourth, just as dawn colored the peaks with rose light, Joey came pounding into the yard, his pony lathered in sweat. "Boss," he gasped. "Riders 10, maybe 12, coming hard from the South Canyon. I seen their dust before sunrise." Cole's voice was calm, almost too calm. "All right. Hank, get the men ready. Bill, bar the bunkhouse doors and move the stock behind the north fence. Wong, keep the womenfolk from town who are visiting in the kitchen cellar. Miss Bram." Lydia cut in before he could finish. "Don't you dare send me into a cellar. I can shoot straighter than half your hands." Hank grinned despite the tension. "Straighter than me, that's certain." Cole studied her a moment, then nodded. "All right, north wall's second position. You cover the corrals." The ranch exploded into motion. Hooves clattered as men moved horses' tools, where abandoned rifles loaded. Lydia climbed the ladder to the loft of the supply shed, settling her rifle across a beam with a clear view of the south approach. Her pulse raced, but not with fear. It was the thrum of defiance, the determination not to be dragged again before jeering eyes. The riders came into sight minutes later, dark shapes against the dust they kicked up. Bandanas hid their faces, but the red-patterned kerchiefs at their necks marked them as Thorntons. They spread in a crescent, guns already drawn, confidence rolling off them in waves. Cole stood in the open yard, rifle resting easy in his hands, posture straight as an iron post. He called out, voice carrying across the valley. "You boys are trespassing on Triple M land. Turn around and you ride out free. Keep coming and you'll leave in the ground." The leader, a thick-shouldered brute with scar tissue on his cheek, laughed harshly. "We've got papers say the woman's wanted and coin enough to back them. Hand her over Ashford and we'll call it square." Lydia leaned into the rifle sight fixed on his chest. Her finger rested light on the trigger. Cole's answer was steady. "This ranch don't answer to forgeries or hired thugs. You want her, you'll have to bury every one of us." The silence before the storm stretched thin. Then the leader jerked his hand and gunfire cracked like thunder. The valley erupted. Bullets whined against timber, sparks flared from stone. The ranch hands returned fire from windows, fence rails, and hay bales turned into barricades. Lydia squeezed the trigger. The leader's horse screamed and went down, throwing him into the dust. She chambered again, heart pounding with grim satisfaction. Men shouted, horses reared, smoke burned the air. Joey fired from the barn loft. Old Bill's booming rifle echoed like cannon, and Hank barked orders while snapping off shots with deadly calm. Cole moved like a shadow, his Colt spitting fire, each round deliberate. He covered ground swiftly, never still long enough to be an easy mark. The raiders pressed hard, but the ranch was ready. Lydia picked her shots, each crack of the Winchester dropping a threat or sending a horse bolting riderless. Sweat stung her eyes, the recoil bruised her shoulder, but she did not falter. Minutes dragged like hours. Then the tide shifted. One outlaw fell screaming, clutching his leg. Another wheeled his horse and fled outright. The scarred leader crawled behind a trough, blood soaking his sleeve, shouting curses that grew more desperate. Cole strode forward through the smoke, rifle leveled. His voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough, you've lost." The remaining riders hesitated. They glanced at their wounded, at the firm wall of ranchers unbroken before them. One by one, they spurred away, dragging the injured with them, leaving the leader behind. He tried to rise, pistol shaking in his good hand. Before Lydia could breathe, Cole's shot cracked neat and final, knocking the weapon into the dust. The leader froze, then sagged back with a snarl. "Get him bound," Cole ordered. Hank and Joey hauled the man up, tying his hands. The yard smelled of blood and gunpowder, the ground littered with spent shells. Lydia climbed down from the loft legs, trembling rifle still hot in her grip. She met Cole in the center of the yard. His eyes swept over her, checking for wounds. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, throat tight. "Better than he is." For a long beat, they stood there, the ranch quiet but for the moans of the captured raider. Men patted each other's shoulders, relief mingling with fury. They had defended their ground. Cole looked toward the horizon, jaw set. "Thornton won't stop here. Today was just his opening move. He'll come again, harder, smarter, and meaner." Lydia tightened her grip on the rifle. "Then so will we." The men around them murmured agreement. The Triple M had chosen its side, and it was hers as much as theirs. For the first time, Lydia felt not like a fugitive clinging to borrowed safety, but like part of a family drawing its line in the dust. As the sun dipped low, staining the battlefield gold, she realized something fierce and undeniable: this land. These people. This fight, it was hers now too. The air over the valley felt different in the days that followed, charged, restless, like the hush before a thunderstorm. Word of the gunfight spread fast. Mesquite Ford buzzed with gossip about how Ashford's crew had stood against Thornton's hired men and sent them limping home. Some called it justice, others called it madness, but all agreed Thornton would not forgive. Lydia worked with the men patching fences, tending wounded horses, even cleaning the rifles with hands that no longer shook. She had faced down bullets and survived. Fear still whispered at night, but pride spoke louder now. She belonged here among these people who had chosen to fight beside her instead of selling her out for a bribe. On the fifth morning, Sheriff Grady rode up the valley with two deputies. Dust coated his coat and lines of worry cut deeper into his face. Cole met him in the yard, Lydia at his side. "Thornton's back," Grady said grimly. "Came in on the Prescott stage last night. Not hiding this time. He's in Mesquite Ford with 20 men, and he's calling you out Ashford. Claims you're harboring a fugitive. He says he'll bring her in one way or another." Cole's jaw hardened. "And you?" "I can't hold 20 men with two deputies," Grady admitted. "I'll keep the peace if I can, but if it breaks, it's your fight." Lydia felt every eye on her, the ranch hand's Wong in his flour-dusted apron, even Joey with his eager, frightened stare. They were all waiting for her choice. She straightened her back. "Then let's end it. I won't spend my life running from forged papers and bullies. If Thornton wants me, he'll have to face me in the open." Cole's eyes flickered, surprise, then respect, then something deeper. He nodded once. "All right, we ride." By mid-afternoon, the Triple M crew entered Mesquite Ford like an army. Cole in front, Lydia riding just behind him, Hank, Bill, Joey, and the others fanning out. Townsfolk scattered from the boardwalks as Thornton's men appeared. At the far end of the street, rifles glinting in the sun. Thornton himself stepped forward, coat immaculate, mustache sharp, smile cold. "Ashford," he called. "Bring me the girl and I'll let your men live." Cole's reply rolled like thunder. "She isn't yours to take." Thornton's eyes slid to Lydia. "Miss Carlton, your cousin awaits. Come quietly and I might forget your indiscretions." Lydia dismounted, boots crunching in the dust. She stood tall, voice carrying clear. "My name is Lydia Bram. I am no one's ward, no one's possession, and no one's shame. If you think otherwise, prove it here." A ripple of shock swept through the crowd that had gathered in doorways and alleys. Thornton's smile faltered. He gestured and his men fanned wider fingers, twitching over triggers. Cole stepped up beside Lydia, his hand hovering near his Colt. "Last chance, Thornton. Leave now." For a heartbeat, the street held its breath. Then Thornton snarled, "Fire." Gunfire erupted, deafening. The street became smoke and thunder. Lydia dove behind a trough rifle, cracking as she fired back. Cole moved like a storm, his shots deliberate and lethal. The Triple M men held their ground, answering bullet for bullet. Thornton's numbers should have overwhelmed them, but townsfolk, stirred by Lydia's defiance and sick of Thornton's stranglehold, began to join in. From a rooftop, a storekeeper fired his old musket. From behind barrels, a farmer with a shotgun blasted at the raiders. The tide turned with every shot. Thornton raged, firing wildly, his polished veneer shattered. He lunged from cover, pistol aimed straight at Lydia. Time slowed the gleam of metal, the hate in his eyes. She steadied her rifle breath even and squeezed. The shot struck true, knocking the weapon from his grasp and spinning him to the dirt. Cole strode forward, gun leveled. The street went silent. Dust swirled. Thornton lay gasping, clutching his arm where blood spread dark. "It's over," Cole said flatly. "You've no more lies, no more men, no more power here." Sheriff Grady stepped in, deputies flanking him, rifles ready. "Richard Thornton, you're under arrest for attempted kidnapping, forgery, and conspiracy." His voice carried the weight of law that no seal or bribe could counterfeit. The men who remained loyal to Thornton dropped their guns one by one. The fight was finished. Lydia stood hard hammering, staring at the man who had nearly destroyed her life. She expected triumph, but what came instead was release chains she had carried since Boston, falling away in the dust of that street. Cole turned to her. "You all right?" She met his gaze, eyes fierce and wet all at once. "Yes." For the first time in years, yes. The town erupted in cheers, rough, weary, but real. Thornton was dragged away, and the people of Mesquite Ford gathered around Lydia, not as a curiosity or scandal, but as one of their own. That evening, back at the ranch, the men feasted like victors. Wong served steaming dishes, Joey played fiddle, and laughter rolled across the yard. Lydia sat on the porch, watching the rifle resting against her chair. Cole joined her, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. "It's done," he said simply. She looked out at the horizon where the last light painted the sky in gold and crimson. "It's beginning," she corrected softly. He studied her, a rare smile touching his lips. "Then let's begin together." And in the glow of victory and the promise of peace, Lydia knew she had found more than freedom. She had found home.